The regional director said salary adjustments were at his discretion. The board-approved compensation policy required executive authorisation for any manager-level pay reductions. He'd reduced my salary by 18% without board approval. I'm Jennifer. I'd been working as a client services manager at a management consulting firm in Stockholm for 3 years. I led a team of 8 consultants and reported to the regional director for Northern Europe. The salary reduction appeared in my payslip without warning. No meeting, no email, just a 28% decrease in my monthly payment. I checked the figure twice. Then I opened my compensation letter from my last review. The annual salary was clearly stated: guaranteed base compensation, no performance qualifiers, no conditional terms. I emailed my regional director. I asked if there had been an error in payroll processing. He responded 2 hours later. No error. He said my compensation had been adjusted to reflect current market conditions and team performance. I asked when the adjustment had been approved. He said he'd made the decision the previous week. He said it was effective immediately. I opened my employment contract. Section 6 outlined compensation terms. Any modification to guaranteed base salary required written notice 30 days in advance. Any reduction required documented performance cause and executive committee approval. I'd received no notice, no documentation, no executive approval. I printed the contract section. I printed my compensation letter. I printed the payslip showing the reduction. I placed them in a folder. Then I went back to work. My team had 3 client projects running. I continued managing them. I attended meetings. I reviewed deliverables. I provided feedback to my consultants. The regional director didn't mention the salary reduction again. He forwarded client briefings as usual. He attended our weekly status calls. I responded professionally to every message. I provided updates when requested. I maintained my normal work rhythm. 1 week after the reduction, I received my team's performance metrics for the quarter. Client satisfaction scores were at 92%. Project delivery was on schedule across all accounts. Billable hours exceeded targets by 11%. I saved the report. My next payslip arrived 2 weeks later. The reduced amount was consistent. No correction, no explanation note. I documented the second payment. I calculated the total reduction. I saved the file with my contract documentation. I didn't contact HR. I didn't escalate to anyone. I continued working. 3 weeks after the reduction, I noticed a change in communication patterns. The regional director stopped copying me on strategic planning emails. I used to receive updates about regional initiatives and budget allocations. Those emails stopped arriving. I checked the distribution lists in our system. My name had been removed from the senior management group. I noted the date. I took a screenshot. I saved it with my other records. I didn't ask to be reinstated. The following week, my regional director scheduled a team restructuring meeting. He announced that 2 of my senior consultants would be transitioning to report directly to him for a high-priority client engagement. The engagement was for one of my existing accounts. I asked about the duration of the reassignment. He said it would be evaluated monthly. I asked if I would retain account oversight. He said he'd be taking the lead on strategic client relationships going forward. I would focus on operational delivery for the remaining team. The 2 consultants moved to his direct supervision the next day. I updated my team structure documentation. I noted the change in my responsibilities. I saved the email announcing the restructuring. I continued managing the remaining team members and accounts. 1 month after the salary reduction, I had accumulated detailed records. 2 payslips showing the reduced salary. Original employment contract with Section 6 highlighted. Compensation letter from last review. Team performance metrics showing strong results. Evidence of responsibility reduction. Documentation of my removal from strategic planning distribution. I organised everything chronologically. I reviewed the company's compensation policy handbook. Section 4.7 outlined the approval hierarchy for compensation changes. Manager-level salary modifications required Executive Committee authorisation. The Executive Committee met quarterly and maintained formal minutes of our decisions. I checked the last Executive Committee meeting date. It had been 5 weeks ago, 1 week before my salary was reduced. I searched the shared drive for Executive Committee minutes. The most recent file was dated from that meeting. I opened it. I reviewed every agenda item, every decision, every authorisation. There was no mention of my compensation. No salary modifications for any managers. No discussion of regional staffing adjustments. I saved a copy of the minutes to my personal records. Then I reviewed the company's escalation procedures in the employee handbook. Section 9 outlined the process for compensation disputes. Step 1. Discuss with direct supervisor. Step 2. Escalate to HR if unresolved. Step 3. Request executive review if policy violations are identified. I'd completed Step 1 when I'd asked my regional director about the reduction. He'd confirmed it was his decision. I drafted an email to HR. I kept it factual. 3 paragraphs. Paragraph 1. My salary was reduced by 28% effective 3 weeks ago. Paragraph 2. Per my employment contract, Section 6, such reductions require written notice, documented cause, and Executive Committee approval. I received none of these. Paragraph 3. I am requesting review of this compensation modification under the company's escalation policy. I attached my contract, my compensation letter, and both reduced payslips. I sent the email to the HR Director for Northern Europe. I received an automated reply confirming receipt. 2 days passed. The HR Director responded. She said she'd received my inquiry. She said she needed to review the matter with the Regional Director. She asked for 1 week to investigate. I confirmed receipt. I didn't provide additional information. I continued working. 5 days later, my Regional Director called me into a meeting. It was scheduled for 30 minutes, just the 2 of us. I arrived with my documentation folder. I didn't plan to use it unless necessary. He said HR had contacted him about my compensation question. He said there seemed to be confusion about his authority to make salary adjustments. I didn't respond. He said regional directors had discretion over manager compensation within their budgets. He said my reduction had been a business decision based on changing market conditions. I asked if that discretion superseded the employment contract requirements. He said employment contracts outlined general terms, but operational decisions were made by regional leadership. I asked if he'd obtained Executive Committee approval as required by Section 6. He said he didn't need committee approval for decisions within his regional authority. I asked if he had documentation showing that Section 6 didn't apply to regional directors. He said he'd been operating under that understanding for his entire tenure. I asked how long that had been. He said 18 months. I asked if he'd modified other manager salaries during that time. He said personnel decisions were confidential. The meeting ended. I returned to my desk. I documented the conversation. I noted his claim that he didn't need committee approval. I waited for HR's response. 1 week after my initial HR email, the HR director sent her findings. She'd reviewed the matter with the regional director. She'd confirmed that the compensation adjustment had been made to align with market conditions and organisational needs. She said the regional director had authority to manage compensation within his budget allocation. She said the matter was closed unless I had additional concerns. I read the email twice. Then I opened the Compensation Policy Handbook again. I went to section 4.7. I read the exact language. All modifications to manager-level base compensation require Executive Committee authorisation, regardless of regional budget authority. The policy was explicit. It didn't include exceptions for regional directors. It didn't reference budget discretion. I drafted a reply to the HR director. I quoted section 4.7 directly. I asked how the regional director's claimed authority aligned with this policy. I also requested copies of the Executive Committee minutes from the last 2 quarterly meetings to verify whether my compensation modification had been authorised. I sent the email. The HR director responded the next day. She said she'd need to consult with the legal team about the policy interpretation. She said the Executive Committee minutes were confidential and required approval from the Chief Operating Officer to share. She said she'd follow up within 2 weeks. I acknowledged receipt. I continued working. My team completed 2 client deliverables during this period. Both were delivered early. Client feedback was positive. I documented everything. 10 days later, I received an email from the Chief Operating Officer's office, not from the COO directly, but from his executive assistant. The email stated that my request for Executive Committee minutes had been received. The COO wanted to schedule a call to discuss my compensation inquiry. The proposed time was 3 days away. 30-minute video call. I accepted the meeting. I spent the next 2 days organising my documentation into a clear timeline. I didn't prepare a presentation. I simply arranged the facts chronologically, with supporting evidence for each point. The day of the call arrived. I logged in 5 minutes early. The COO appeared exactly on time. He was alone. No HR, no regional director. He introduced himself briefly. He said he'd been reviewing my situation. He had some questions. He asked me to explain when I first learned about the salary reduction. I walked through the timeline. Payslip arrived with reduced amount, no prior notice, email to regional director asking if it was an error, his confirmation that it was intentional. He asked if I'd received any performance feedback prior to the reduction. I said no. My last review had been 6 months prior, with strong ratings. He asked if my regional director had explained the business justification. I said he'd cited market conditions and team performance. I noted that team metrics had been above target throughout the period. He asked if I'd been given notice of the change. I said no. The reduction appeared in my payslip without warning. He asked if I knew whether Executive Committee approval had been obtained. I said I'd reviewed the committee minutes from the most recent meeting. There was no record of my compensation being discussed. He asked how I'd obtained the minutes. I said they were in the shared management folder, where they were always posted. He made notes. Then he asked about Section 6 of my employment contract. I shared my screen. I showed him the exact language. 30-day notice requirement, documented performance cause, Executive Committee authorisation. He asked if any of those requirements had been met. I said no. He asked what I was requesting. I said I was requesting that the company honour the terms of my employment contract. He said he'd need to investigate further. He asked if I'd be willing to wait 2 weeks for a full review. I said yes. He thanked me for my time. The call ended. I documented the conversation. I noted that he'd asked about the executive committee approval specifically. I saved my notes. 2 weeks passed. I heard nothing from the COO, nothing from HR, nothing from my regional director. I continued managing my reduced team. I completed my assigned work. I maintained my documentation. On day 13, I received a calendar invitation for a meeting 3 days later. The organiser was the COO's office. The attendees list included me, the COO, the HR director, and the general counsel. My regional director was not included. I accepted the invitation. The meeting was scheduled for 1 hour. I prepared nothing new. My documentation was already complete. The meeting day arrived. I joined the video call on time. All 3 of them were present. The COO began. He said they'd completed a comprehensive review of my compensation situation. He said they'd identified several policy compliance issues. The General Counsel spoke next. She outlined their findings. The salary reduction violated my employment contract, Section 6, on multiple grounds. No written notice provided, no documented performance cause, no executive committee authorisation obtained. The regional directors claimed authority to modify manager compensation without committee approval contradicted company policy, Section 4.7. The compensation reduction had been implemented without following required procedures. The COO continued. He said they were prepared to offer a resolution. The company would restore my original salary effective immediately. I would receive back payment for the difference between my reduced and original salary for the entire affected period. The regional director would receive additional training on compensation policies and approval procedures. My employment record would be updated to remove any reference to the salary reduction. He asked if I found those terms acceptable. I asked about the team restructuring. I asked if my consultants would be returned to my supervision. He said the restructuring had been a separate business decision. It would remain in place. I asked if my responsibilities had permanently reduced. He said team structures were evaluated based on business needs. I asked if the reduced responsibilities would impact my future compensation or advancement opportunities. The General Counsel said my compensation and career progression would be evaluated based on my current role performance, not on the temporary salary reduction that was being reversed. She emphasised that the reduction was being treated as an administrative error that should not have occurred. I asked for that confirmation in writing. She said it would be included in the resolution documentation. I asked for 48 hours to review the terms. The COO agreed. The meeting ended. I spent the next day reviewing everything. I calculated the back payment amount. I verified that the resolution addressed all the contract violations. I also reviewed what wasn't being addressed. My consultants remained reassigned. My strategic responsibilities remained reduced. My role had effectively been diminished, even if my salary was restored. I drafted questions about my role going forward. Then I deleted them. The salary restoration addressed the contract violation. The rest was business reorganisation that they'd framed as separate. I accepted the resolution terms. The back payment was processed within 1 week. The amount was exact. 4 months of salary difference, plus adjustment for tax withholding. My next regular payslip showed the restored amount. I received written confirmation from the General Counsel that the reduction had been an administrative error, not reflective of my performance. The letter stated that my employment record had been corrected. I saved the letter with my documentation. Work continued. I managed my smaller team. I delivered my projects. My responsibilities remained in the operational sphere while my regional director handled strategic relationships. I never received my 2 senior consultants back. 3 months after the resolution, my regional director announced he was taking a position at another firm. The transition would occur in 6 weeks. There was no mention of the compensation matter. No connection was made publicly. I didn't ask. A new regional director was appointed. She reviewed the team structures in her first month. She asked me about the consultant reassignments. I explained the timeline. I provided the performance history of the team members who'd been reassigned. She said she'd be re-evaluating regional structures over the next quarter. 2 months later, the consultants were returned to my team. The change was presented as part of broader reorganisation, no reference to the previous restructuring. I accepted them back. I resumed full team management. I worked at the firm for another year after that. My performance reviews were strong. My compensation increased during annual review cycles. When I eventually left, it was for a director position at a different consultancy. Better title, better compensation structure, clearer governance. I gave appropriate notice. I transitioned my accounts professionally. I left on good terms. The documentation from that period stayed in my personal files. The contract, the payslips, the executive committee minutes, the resolution letter. I never needed to reference it again, but I knew exactly where it was if I ever did. The company's compensation policy was updated 6 months after my resolution. Section 4.7 was revised to include explicit language about regional authority limitations and mandatory committee approval. I saw the update in a company-wide policy memo. I didn't comment on it. The facts had already settled the matter long before.